Not sure if you already addressed this, but your friend Jesse Ventura, who has endorsed RFK, is being considered as his running mate. What say you? So I think it's actually important to clarify that I think what you're referencing is when Jesse Ventura spoke at a rally on behalf of RFK. And Gavin and I were also a little bit surprised by this, so we did a little digging. Anyway, long story short, he made the same offer to the Green Party, as well as I believe to the Libertarian Party, because he was trying to draw attention to third-party races writ large. So in a kind of apolitical maneuver, he made his, name recognition and, his ability to draw a crowd available to numerous presidential candidates, potentially even Cornel West. I'm not sure, but he was perfectly happy for, to aid in the third party movement as a whole, regardless of where, the political needle fell, given the fact that it was such an obvious duopoly election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, two people that Jesse Ventura, doesn't really see eye to eye with, right?
Yeah, sure. So this is interesting. I guess we can use this as a segue into talking a little bit about the RFK story in the New York Times, because this is pretty interesting. So yeah, Jesse, he tweeted this in February saying he supports all third-party and independent candidates running for the U.S. presidency, from Cornel West to Dr. Stein to Robert Kennedy and everyone else not running under the Democrat and Republican Party banners, which is pretty expected from Jesse Ventura. He usually has solidarity with independents and third-party movements, whether they are kind of more left-leaning or right-leaning. Typically when it comes to Jesse Ventura, he's an anti-establishment independent. And for the most part, that means that he's kind of down with not anyone, but a lot of people that are challenging the duopoly, challenging the establishment, at least through his eyes, right? So, I remember when Jesse talked to us about how he was enthusiastic even about like Andrew Yang and the Forward Party, right? We didn't necessarily share that enthusiasm, but the point is, I think that Jesse cares more about the idea of fighting the establishment, the idea of fighting the duopoly. He's not as anal about specific policy positions as perhaps Zac and I are. So, like I said, he's more willing to, get behind the libertarians. When, Gary Johnson's right. I forget if he actually endorsed Gary Johnson, Andrew Yang running against the establishment, Cornel West, Dr. Stein. Like, that's really his vibe, in my opinion. Not to say that he doesn't care about policy. He definitely does. And a lot of his, policy positions I totally endorse and agree with. But I think it's kind of in line with his philosophy ever since he's been active in politics from Minnesota in the 90s, that he's kind of an anti-establishment guy. As long as you're challenging the establishment, specifically the duopoly, he'll probably be there ready to enlist right along with you. So that's a good segue into talking about this New York Times
article. Yes, Isaac,
article.
You can introduce somebody at an event and not endorse them. That's why he didn't say, I endorse RFKJ over Cornel West and Dr. Jill Stein. He just said that he was going to support them in getting on the ballot.
Yeah, to be fair, if you listen to that speech that Jesse Ventura gave at, I believe it was an Arizona rally for RFK, it did sound like an endorsement. He didn't say I endorse RFK, but he was like, this country needs a Kennedy, or something like that. It was very endorsement-esque. So I'm not really.
If he endorses Kennedy, I'll be a little annoyed. I'll be honest with you. I'll be annoyed by that. I'll be super annoyed. I don't think you can square that. Like, I will be annoyed. So maybe you guys can call me out. Maybe I'm projecting here. But I would be like, God damn it. Like, obviously Jesse's do whatever he wants, but I wouldn't be happy about that. I would be like, God damn it. This guy is cheerleading a huge war, and one of our biggest anti-war guys just comes out here and like, I don't predict that. I believe that Jesse is just out here saying that I want to see people get on the ballot so that we have a free and fair democracy. That's how I'm choosing to interpret this, because I haven't heard him say the word endorse, and I'm a stickler for that.
Right. Well, I mean, according to Jesse, from what I understand, RFK is the only candidate that took him up on that offer, right? He said, I'll help out any third-party candidate in any way that you want. And I guess he basically got ghosted by the Green Party. Not a surprise, given how they treated him in 2016, or was it 2020 when he wanted to run? I think it was 2020, when he was kind of, offering to lend his, his name to the party as their nominee. They weren't very enthusiastic about it. But either way, it might not just be an endorsement, Zac, because we have this pretty unexpected article in the New York Times to go through. And I'm really interested in everyone's opinion on this, because these are two people that I frankly did not have on my bingo card for RFK's running mate list. He only gave 2 names, Aaron Rodgers and former Governor Jesse Ventura. So let's read a couple paragraphs here. RFK Jr. has recently approached the NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers and the former Minnesota Governor and professional wrestler Jesse Ventura about serving as his running mate on an independent presidential ticket. And both have welcomed the overtures. 2 people familiar with the discussions said. Mr. Kennedy confirmed on Tuesday that the 2 men were at the top of his list. It is not clear if either has been formally offered the post. However, and Mr. Kennedy is still considering a short list of potential candidates. Mr. Kennedy said he had been speaking with Mr. Rodgers pretty continuously for the past month, and that he had been in touch with Mr. Ventura since the former governor introduced him at a campaign event last month in Arizona. A representative for Mr. Rodgers did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Mr. Ventura's son, Tyrell Ventura, said in an email message late Tuesday, no one has officially asked Governor Ventura to be a vice presidential candidate, so the governor does not comment on speculation. So according to Tyrell, this is still basically speculation. Jesse Ventura has not officially been offered the vice presidential spot on RFK's ticket. But I do want to just entertain this for a little bit and assume the reporting is accurate. Let's assume that RFK Jr. is really thinking about either Aaron Rodgers or, Governor Ventura. And I just have to say that one of those choices is obviously far more serious than the other. Aaron Rodgers has no political experience. He's a total crank, and his views on the vaccine are basically identical to Robert Kennedy.
Hold on here. Hold on here, buddy. Let me, before we go and just besmirch a good man, a great man, and I know a great man when I see one. I'm a Kennedy. I was raised in the tradition of great men. My last name being Kennedy. I was named after my father, Robert Kennedy Sr., and I being Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I know a great man, and I know a quick learner. That's a man that can learn on his feet. Of course, he's been on the bleachers a lot this season, and he's been paying attention to the news. He says he's learned a lot during COVID and how the media lies to you, perpetually lies to you. And what I think is, look at my picture, look at my physique, look at my stature. Okay, I understand a man that's an alpha male. I understand a man with a need to come out here and take control of the situation. And that's where Aaron Rodgers will help me do. I've always wanted to be friends with a high school quarterback. Normally they ignored me. But I thought, hey, here's a guy, he's reaching the tail end of his productivity on the gridiron. How about you give it a try on the lawn outside the White House? My brothers and I, we used to love to play football, a good old American pastime out in the lawns of the White House, of course, as Kennedys. That was, not too uncommon.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Kennedy. That was good stuff. Yeah, anyway, Aaron Rodgers, totally an unserious pick. Completely just I think that him being RFK's vice president, obviously Aaron Rodgers maybe has more name recognition with young people than Jesse Ventura. He's probably more of a social media star or whatever, maybe specifically with right-leaning anti-vaxxers and shit like that. But as far as a serious presidential ticket is concerned, let's be honest, Jesse Ventura is the obvious pick. And I'm not necessarily saying I hope that happens for the aforementioned reasons. RFK Jr., as you said, Zach, is currently cheerleading genocide in Gaza. I do not think that Jesse Ventura agrees with him on that policy, but that's actually why I think he would be a much better pick, because he actually would balance out the ticket. He would make the ticket a lot more dynamic, and it wouldn't just feel like this weird online kind of ticket where it's just these echo chamber conspiratorial anti-vax people. Because like I said, Aaron Rodgers doesn't really bring anything new to the ticket. If you agree with RFK's position on the vaccine, you're going to agree with Aaron Rodgers on the vaccine. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers really even cares much about war and peace. He doesn't, speak out against militarism. But yeah, I just feel like if RFK wants to actually run a serious campaign, which he arguably is not, I think that, as I said, Jesse Ventura is just clearly the right decision. I really do think he would balance out the ticket in a way that would be more dynamic. And not to say that I would support RFK, but if RFK wants to talk about, bridging the country and bridging the divide and all that sort of crap that he likes to wax about, I think it would be cool to invite someone onto his ticket who doesn't just agree with him on everything, specifically the vaccine, given that that's a pretty controversial issue that the country does not necessarily agree with RFK on, right? I don't think that over half of the country agrees with his position on the subject matter. And that is interesting to me that he would consider Jesse Ventura, given that Ventura has actually been pretty pro-vaccine. We can take a look at a clip here in a second from an older Vanguard episode where he actually talks a little bit about the vaccine. I thought this was an interesting contrast to the rhetoric coming from RFK on the vax. This is what Jesse had to say back 3 years ago. This is an older episode of the Vanguard. But yeah, let's take a look.
And I got a great idea. I heard this the other day. I don't remember where. This would be a stimulus package, and it would also fight the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with right now. Why don't they pay people $1,000 to $1,200 when they get the vaccine? Hand them a check for $1,000. That way, everybody will get the vaccine. You'll get rid of the pandemic by using the vaccine, and people will get a stimulus package for getting the vaccine. It seems you could conquer two things with one stone on that, doesn't it? So that's my position on it. And you notice here, I'll give you a good transition, Brigitte. We don't have no problem spending money on war, do we?
So definitely an interesting opinion. That old microphone was just so bad for my voice. It made me sound like such a whiny little prepubescent loser or something.
Gavin's nuts hadn't dropped yet until season 3 of the Vanguard.
Anyway, definitely a contrast there from what RFK not only is saying now about the vaccine, but what he was saying when the vaccine actually was rolled out. Of course, it's been nothing but fear mongering and conspiracy theories. And, Jesse Ventura is usually the king of conspiracy theories. He literally hosted a show called Conspiracy Theory. And when it comes to 9/11 or JFK, another Kennedy, he's all in. But he did push back a lot on some of the stupidity revolving around the COVID vaccine. At least the last I heard, it's possible he's changed his mind on the subject matter. Maybe he's read RFK's writings or his books, and now he agrees with RFK. But the last I heard, Jesse Ventura was definitely solidly pro-vaccine, something he actually took a lot of flack for some of his old school fans that were expecting him to just take the kind of knee-jerk reactionary conspiratorial position, were a little bit upset that he had a more sensible, just yeah, of course, this is a good vaccine. And I totally agreed with him, by the way, that the government should have tied in another stimulus to the vaccine in order to encourage people to actually take it. Obviously, people really needed money at that time too, so it would have been a good incentive and a good way to help out the economy. But yeah, what do you think about all that, Zach? Am I being a little bit too optimistic? Am I trying to see the silver lining in all of this?
Well, it's interesting. Personally, I think that they kind of give it away why RFK floated him in this Politico article that I was reading this morning that we can pull up on screen. The Kennedy campaign also hosted a rally in Tucson where Ventura, who had a career as a professional wrestler before he entered politics, introduced Kennedy on stage. Ventura won an upset victory for Minnesota Governor in 1998 as an independent. Following the event, Kennedy's biographer wrote a blog post for the super PAC supporting Kennedy. That LOL. Remember when people who were supporting Kennedy pretended to care about big money in politics? Okay. I told Jesse of a poll of under 30 voters finding him the most popular choice to be Bobby's vice presidential running mate. And I think that probably had a big reason as to why he released the names that he chose to. Personally, I still think that there's a far more likely outcome where he picks somebody like Tulsi Gabbard to be his running mate. But I think that he was very selective. And honestly, from a strategic standpoint, guys, you know how I feel about RFK. I actually think it was kind of smart for him to tease these two names specifically because they were to virtue signal essentially to his audience that this is where his head's at. To the people who support him, those are two names that it's going to pick up the prick people's ears and go, oh, that guy gets me. Jesse Ventura he has a very specific, very devoted audience of people who fuck with him, whether that's from his wrestling background when he was an actual wrestler or when he kind of changed the game and became an announcer for the WWE, or a lot of his influence on the Vanguard shines through. And then, of course, his, historic run for governor of Minnesota, where he crushed the duopoly and all that jazz. Check out the Vanguard mini doc about that, where we interviewed the governor ourselves. Got a lot of love for Jesse. For sure. He's always been, super, super courteous and kind with us and gracious. So wonderful guy.